Leonard. Do you want to do a mic check?
I do. How do I sound?
You sound very, very good.
Okay.
Very knowledgeable.
All right. Well, are we ready for this this show?
Yeah. Yeah.
President Peterson, if I may ask, are you the chair of the SPB committee meeting, or is that a different director?
No,
that's
it's Jilly Gokagandhi is, and I know
Okay.
she's going to be working out of her home.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr has notified that she will be a little bit late. She is speaking at a graduation. Director Garcia will also be a little bit late. Director Herndon,
Present.
Director O'Halloran,
Here.
Director Leonard,
Present.
Director Peterson,
Present?
Director Seamson,
Present.
Director Taylor is en route, and Chair Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
We have 6 present.
I will now ask the secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes. Para las personas que desean escuchar la Junta Escolar en español, por favor de llamar al teléfono 312-626-6799 y marcar el número de código 608-130-5362. Una vez más, para escuchar la Junta Escolar en español, por favor de llamar al teléfono 312-626-6799 y marcar el número de código 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Pursuant to Board Rule 1.06, this meeting is being conducted virtually. Board members may be participating in person from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. We will now move into our items of business. As stated in the public notice, individuals who wish to speak were required to register in advance. I ask those waiting to speak to please remain on the platform until you are called upon. Although we are on a virtual platform, we will still follow Robert's Rules of Orders, which dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair. Also, any questions or requests, including those from board members or the administration, are to be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. As always, written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Written comments may be submitted to the board via the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the meeting, agendas, and minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item number 1 is an informational overview and public hearing on the 2022-23 superintendent's proposed budget. This is an informational item, and the board will give public testimony on this item. However, no action will be taken.
Administration, would you please present the item?
Good evening, Chair Gandhi and members of the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. Tuesday, the board held the statutory board hearing, and tonight we will continue deliberation over the proposed budget before you. Before we go into further discussions, I would like to provide some clarity about what is contained in this budget when it comes to services to help students, including mental health services. Just looking at school counselors, there are over 130 FTEs allotted for a ratio of 262 students to 1 counselor at the high school level. The budget for school counselors is just over $14 million, which is more than the $12 million for school safety. Included in the school safety's budget is over $2 million dollars for youth advisors through the Violence-Free Zone program. In the budget, there are many supportive services for students, including school counselors, school social workers, psychologists, the Black and Latino Male Achievement Program, youth advisors provided through Violence-Free Zone, equity, access, and inclusion that includes restorative practices, trauma-informed care, as well as gender identity inclusion, to name a few. Altogether, for mental health services, there is a budget for over $82 million proposed for fiscal year 2023. We look forward to the budget discussions tonight to hear further public comments, and we are available to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions?
Madam Chair, Director Taylor has joined the platform.
Hello. Thank you. Okay. Actually, well, are we okay with taking public testimony before we ask questions? Great. Dr. Mann, do we have public testimony on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have one individual registered to speak on this item, and we will go to that speaker right now.
Great.
The first speaker that we have on the platform tonight is Angela Lucas Foley. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony. Okay, so
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucasfoley.
thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Posley, Chair Garcia, and directors. I come to you again this evening as a white educator and parent of 2 students in MPS. Additionally, I am a proud member of Anti-Racist White Educators of Milwaukee. I want to again draw attention to how we are supporting culture and climate throughout the district in the proposed budget. I am concerned about how positions are being aligned and supported across the district for system change. My concern as an educator and parent of 2 white students and a concerned community member, how can we recreate our system of education if we continue to fund the same way? How are funds and time allotted for school teams to discuss, build, and maintain culturally responsive schools? I want to also draw attention to the amendment proposed by President Peterson. My concern is additional funding at the director level without looking at how we are putting a plan in place. There is and continues to be poor outcomes for Black and Brown students, and we need systems to address the changes we need to see for our students. Specifically, how are we rating services of support? Where is a plan of action to address student needs? What is the timeline? Benchmarks? How are we knowing that we're meeting those benchmarks, and where's the support? We have a lot of positions designed to support, which administration pointed out tonight. But again, how are these services braided together? What is the plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan that's looking at a timeline and benchmarks? And then
Thank you, Madam Chair. That completes the public testimony for tonight. The item is back with the committee.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will take questions from committee members now. So would anybody like to ask a question?
Director
Okay,
Simpson. Madam Chair, you have Director Simpson in the queue, and then President Peterson.
Great, so we'll go to Director Simpson. first.
Thank you so much, Chair Gokul Gandhi. Yeah, so I wanted to thank administration for sending us the positions for art, music, gym, supportive services, counselors that we had asked for the last time. And as I was looking at it and noticing at the school level, some of those reductions, I was just wondering how those decisions were made. Was it based on school population, a decline in enrollment from last year to projections for next year? Just how were those decisions made?
Administration.
Chair Garcia. Oh my goodness. Chair Gokul Gandhi and members of the board. Actually, right now we're having Jennifer Mims Howell, who's going to be walking through to the door to address that particular question. But I'm going to turn it over to Martha Kreisman for comments at this time.
Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, the positions are figured based on the school population, and some of the decisions are also at the school level. So we have a formula that figures how many for different levels of schools. And then also schools can add to that, or maybe they added to it one year and chose something different the next year. So that could be part of the fluctuations. And Jennifer Mims Howell is here to help address the changes in some of the staffing for supportive services.
Good evening, Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howell, Chief Academic Officer from Milwaukee Public Schools. Some of the changes that happened last year was based on for the coming year was based on our enrollment from this current year. We also looked at the needs of the students. For instance, in the schools where we know that we needed to put additional ESL support, we made adjustments there. We also made adjustments to our supportive staff, such as school counselors, our social worker, and as well as our psychologist staff. And we also looked at the grouping of certain types of students together. So since the school closure and the reopening, we've had a shift in where some of our professionals have landed, as well as where some of our students have gone to school. For instance, for our hearing impaired students, some of them have come out of the middle school and are going into the high schools. So we've had to make some adjustments in how many interpreters we have at certain high schools, as well as our elementary and our middle schools.
Director Simpson, any follow-up?
Yeah, just so, as a teacher, I remember sitting there, at a staff meeting, and we were told we were, getting a budget reduction and we'd have to eliminate staff, and just how, so if I'm understanding correctly, it wasn't so much a budget reduction overall, it was more based on enrollment.
Administration.
I mean, if we're trying to build up art, music, gym in all of our schools, to give schools every opportunity to grow those programs that we can, I guess is what I want to make sure we're doing, which I'm sure we are, but just to put it out there.
Administration.
Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. One other point that happens with the allocation of these positions is in the spring, we keep schools whole, meaning we don't adjust, we pretend they're going to get the same amount of students as they had the fall prior. And so as we do the allocations in the spring, when it comes to fall, we don't readjust those. So if a school's enrollment did go down, they still get that same allocation that we planned in the spring. So you probably notice more fluctuation from fiscal year 22 to the spring now than you would in the fall. And did you have something to add?
Hello, Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Lynn Rule, Director of Financial Planning and Budget. Basically, it's more for the reason that when you're talking about art, music, physical education type teachers, as you know, many of them are split between a number of schools. And if we change those assignments in fall, it would cause a lot of problems across numerous schools. So rather than make those changes in fall, we keep them the same in fall, but then in spring, we make adjustments for those changes in enrollment. As you all well know, our enrollment did go down last year, so that caused the numbers to come down.
Director Simpson, any follow-up?
No, thank you very much.
Great. We will go to President Peterson next. You're muted.
Thank you. I apologize for being muted. I was wondering if the district, the administration could explain the funding that we have that's in the budget for the Black and Latino Male Achievement Program. I know there were some questions about that at a previous meeting.
Administration.
Chair Gulkhan-Gandhi, Director Peterson, members of the committee, the Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The Black and Latino Male Achievement Program has funding in several different budgets, including some in the ESSER. And altogether, they have 2.2 million of funding set aside.
President Peterson, any follow-up?
Could you do the same for the violence-free zone?
Administration.
Members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The violence-free zone has funding in the safety budget, and they also have funding in ESSER. So the total for fiscal year 23 is 2.4 million, 2 million of which is in that safety budget.
Thank you very much. That's it.
Great. And then we will go to Director O'Halloran. Madam Secretary, is that correct?
That is correct. And then you have Director Herndon and then Taylor.
Great.
Thank you. I have two questions. One, I had sent some emails and I got information back regarding nutrition, specifically around staffing challenges. One of the challenges that was noted was that the civil service exam is a barrier to employment for some people. Like they'll apply, but they are informed that they have to take the exam, and for whatever reason they decide not to go through with it, or they get filtered out after the exam. And I was wondering if I wanted to put together an amendment to help applicants get through that process. Like, can we envision a training program that would assist applicants to get through that civil service exam, whatever the challenge may be, to help get them into the door? Because as we've heard time and again, nutrition services is a concern to our students, and I would love to make sure that we are fully staffed in those positions. So would administration have any insight into how we can better prepare applicants for that exam?
Administration.
Chair Gulkhan-Gandhi, Director O'Halloran, members of the board, Adrian Maddaleni, Chief Human Resources Officer. Yes, the civil service testing requirements is a challenge for us. Unfortunately, it's something that we have to work through. I want to say part of the problem is when we do the applications, let's say we get 100 individuals that will complete an application. Then we send out an invite to test. And then eventually maybe around 50% of those people actually show up for the test to begin with. That's the part. And then there is a certain percentage end up passing the test from there. We have looked at ways that we could work with some of our temp agencies, whether it be Goodwill, Talent Bridge, to kind of assist individuals in how we can that maybe serve in a temporary capacity to get them some training to prepare for the test so they can come work for us permanently. There's only so much we can do as we are providing the test. We can't like show them the answers, those type of things, but we're trying to work through that. We always consistently review the test and we look at how many passed to see, is it too tough? Are we asking the appropriate questions? So we do try and compare and level set to make sure that we're in that right space. So we are cognizant of that, but also want to make clear that a big problem is just getting people to come take the test.
Director O'Halloran, any follow-up?
Thank you for that. I think if there were a way to communicate, like if some of them just don't even show up because of the test, like if there were a way to communicate that we get that test anxiety is real, like we all feel it too, and we can support you if you need to, because at this point, there are so many employers that are saying like, come apply. You don't even have to know how to do the job. We're going to pay you 20 bucks an hour. You're going to get benefits. Like I saw, I think it was one of the meat packing plants. You don't need any prior experience. We're going to hire you and train you and give you like a $500 signing bonus. So I just, in this critical area, it feels like it's a common and continuing concern. So I just want to be kind of, I don't know, creative in the way we problem solve that. Okay, I think that answers my question. I did have one other question around the mandated financial literacy. Has this come up? One of my principals asked about how, like, where in the budget we're supporting this class and how the high schools are supposed to be able to rise to this requirement. Is that supposed to come from their own budget, or is that something that the administration has put thought into how to support in a longer term way?
Administration.
Gandhi, members of the board. One of the things that we brought to the board the new graduation requirements, and it's some years out before, but we have 4 pilot schools that are there right now that we're working through that process with. And we are going to make sure that our young people are prepared to take on that responsibility and be successful in getting through that requirement. But for the majority of our high schools, that year is yet to come for that to be a graduation requirement. So we do have 4 schools that are ready to go and have been staffed and moving forward with the requirement. I have Dr. John Hill, who's over that particular program. Dr. Hill.
Chair Gandhi, members of the committee. Yes, the financial literacy, we currently have Riverside, Hamilton, and Green Tree as our first cohort. We have a number, I believe it's 10 off the top of my head, that are teaching the classes this spring as a second cohort. And we will add additional schools the following year. And I know in June, we'll be bringing our quarterly report to share the end of the year data with all of you.
Director Halloran, any follow-up?
Just so I'm clear, so at this time, because it's not a requirement for all high school students, it's kind of a bridge we will cross as we come to it in later years, but it would be a discussion possibly around supplementary budgeting. I think the idea is like, do they have to carve it out of their existing budget, or are we going to brainstorm ways to meet this need longer term? But I can hold any other questions then apparently until the June update.
Director O'Halloran, did you want an answer on if this is coming? Nope, great. Okay, we will go to Director Herndon. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
You are correct, Director Herndon and then Taylor.
Great, Director Herndon.
Okay, thank you so much. This question is in regard to FTEs allocated to art, music, Phi Ed. program. And what I noticed in the most recent documents I received within the last month was that there was some manipulation or assignment of staffers or music teachers where they were going to far too many schools, which when we put this policy forth, the most recent policy, which was 2019, that's what we tried to get away from, where a teacher was not bouncing to 5 to 10 schools. That was just too much, and it's a deterrent to people remaining in the jobs and in the position. So I'd like confirmation that either we're gonna do that, or we're gonna stick to the policy, which is try to give everyone at least a 0.5.
Administration.
Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Lynn Rule, Director Financial Planning and Budget. Yes, we are in the process. We are phasing in over 4 years, FY 23 is the 3rd year of the program. So we are slowly getting so that everyone will be at 2 schools or less. It's just taking some time to get there.
Director Herndon, any follow-up?
Well, I would like to ask that the concentration be made on the elementary students for the simple fact that most recently I had a situation where the middle school did not have a music teacher, which I was totally unaware of all year. And that is not acceptable, because our goal in this whole thing is to make sure that when they get to high school, that there's a degree of proficiency where the student has some choices as to where they'd like to concentrate their effort during their high school years. So to me, that's very, very critical that we stick with that objective. And if there's concessions to be made, let's try to avoid the K through 8, if at all possible. And if there are issues, please let the board directors know about it so that we can try to do something to modify that. Because without making sure that K through 8 is well served, we aren't preparing for our high school students appropriately.
Administration.
Chair Gokul Gandhi, Director Herndon, members of the committee, Jennifer Mims Howe, Chief Academic Officer. In many cases, we are continuing to hire our music, art, and Phi-Ed teachers so that we have them in our schools. We continue to make sure that we are staffing, as you said, Director Herndon, as appropriate for our middle school so they can have those introductions prior to going to high school. We do have recruitment going on right now, and we'll make sure that we will remember to make placements as appropriate for our music and our band as well. As we look at the other fine arts areas too, we're looking at the schools and what they can offer based on the teachers that we're having. So our goal is to continue to phase in more opportunities for our students as we continue to hire staff.
Director Herndon, any follow-up?
No, I just want to make sure that I shared that, because it really was not acceptable for middle school for this year, and we weren't aware. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Gokul Gandhi. President Peterson touched on mine a little bit. It was in reference of the violence-free. I hear about the 2.4 million, but it's saying it's in safety and ESSER. I guess I would like to know more details on exactly what is that funding go towards and how is it actually working in the alliance in the violence-free zone. And I know it's a lot, so if they can probably give a brief overview tonight, but then send out more detail to the whole committee, but I would like them to speak on it, and then I'll ask the second question.
Administration.
Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. For the violence-free zone right now, the funding that we talked about, the 2.4 million, is for the contract for 2 organizations that provide youth advisors for 12 of our schools. And they provide 5 of those at each of the schools that they serve. Those advisors work with the students. They're younger adults that have had experiences like our students, and so that they can relate with them. And they help mentor the students. Edna Groen is here to tell us more about the work that happens with the violence-free zone.
Chair Gokungandi.
Okay. Chair Gogolkandi and all members of the board, Edna Groen, Director of School Safety. The contract with the VFZs, I'm not sure how much was said already, but there's two vendors. There's the Running Rebels that are in 7 of our schools, and then there's the Milwaukee Christian Center, which they're in 5 of our schools. The program has been almost the same for several years, and that is that they will work with the youth, the students in that school that have some kind of challenge, whether it's education or problems at home, a dysfunctional home, or GPAs are going down. And there's supposed to be 5 advisors per school. I know that at least the Christian Center has experienced problems this year, as well as everybody else that is not reaching their maximum capacity. But anyway, each advisor that is can carry up to approximately 25 students as a caseload. And they work with them during the school day for the most part, but if there's something that requires an evening or a non-school day outreach, they're for that too. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope I answered, or is there more that I need to address?
Director Taylor, any clarification or follow-up?
Yeah, that's definitely, I guess I would like more details and reason, and that can be something that can be sent to us, because I feel like it would be more than we can accomplish tonight. But to me, that just gave a brief overview of directly what the monies is used for. And I can send
Again,
something to administration with some of the more in-depth answers that I'm looking for.
So administration, could you please follow up with some information about VFC? I think Director Taylor, what you're looking for is kind of the overview of the program, probably the amount of children we serve, what activity, just an overview with a dollar amount. Would that be good?
Yes.
Great. So administration, if you could please send that over, that would be great. And you had another question, Director Taylor?
Yeah, my other question is, and this one probably will be one that they have to get more information on. I'm thinking about all of our employees in onboarding. Just wanted to know, like, what type of training are we giving for those individuals? I know, like, for example, we have training for some of the teachers and the specialists, and maybe the CNAs or engineers. But I guess I wanted more details for the categories. How are we doing onboarding training to ensure that we're kind of bringing them in to be more susceptible and ready to work, versus I know some of the units have told me they don't receive any training, and it's basically they're just going into the building day one and kind of learning more hands-on.
And I'll add on to that, if you could tell us if there's a dollar amount attached to that in the budget from HR, that would be helpful to know. So administration, I added on to your question, Director Taylor.
You are perfectly fine. Thank you. I like that.
Administration.
Chair Gokungandi and members of the board. There's a couple of things that I would say, and I'll pass it off to the team. First of all, with the teaching staff, we have basically now a week of orientation before they're going out to the schools, and as well as we could kind of walk through that particular piece of what take place on those particular days. I have Edna Groen here, and he can kind of talk to you about what we're doing for safeties and the time frame around safeties and what we're doing. There's also an orientation in the Department of Facilities and Maintenance, and what that is. We could get Sean Kane in to kind of talk about that. So Adria, if you could talk about teaching staff and other staff that you know.
Thank you. Yes. Chair Gokul-Gandhi, members of the committee, Adrian Madeline, Chief Human Resources Officer. As Dr. Posley alluded to, a variety of employee groups have different type of onboarding or new employee orientation. First off, I'll tell you that every new hire in the district, we do have a general HR new employee orientation that tells them, the basics about the district, the administrative policy, stuff of that nature. That is provided to every new employee. Beyond that, for specific training, it varies. It depends on each employee group and depends on their work calendar. Because some employee groups have work calendars where they have like professional development days built in. So at the beginning of the year, there is some type of orientation. And then how many days, how often it is, varies depending on the employee group. Yeah, it can be a week long. I mean, for teachers, I know building operations has their own training. School safety as well has specifics on their training and how often and how many days it is. There's no necessarily a budget line specific for onboarding. It's kind of built in through the salary calendar for the employees. And I'll hand it off to Sean Kane, who may have more specific information on his area for their training.
Good evening, Chair Gokogani, members of the committee, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities Maintenance Services. For building operations with their engineers, typically the individuals come in as building service helpers, and when they do get onboarded, we do have an orientation that we work pretty much the first day. They come in on a Monday. We go through orientation for the entire day, for the 8 hours, and then at that point, they get to assign to their schools. So they go through the orientation, go through cleaning procedures and other protocols.
Director Taylor, any follow-up?
Yeah, I'm gonna follow up with the administration and send over a couple of the units that told me, and maybe that would just help. And if we have something documentation or in writing, I know they said they can't point to anywhere within the budget these line items. So I thank you for that, Chair Gokogani. But I think that is also vital information to see what we're spending and what are we doing when we talk about onboarding as well too. So I thank you for that. And can I possibly ask one more question?
Can I? Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
Thank you. I know the previous budget, myself and President Peterson have allotted money for the trauma health informed care workers. I guess I would just like to know, like, are they working at specific schools? And because we just went through a pandemic and we were off for like a year and a half, what were some of the ways that they were staying connected to the district or to the young people and able to complete their job?
Administration?
Chair Gokogani and members of the board, I have Travis Pinter. Clerk provide that answer. Travis.
Director Gokogani, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. As far as the trauma-informed care staff, we have two different types. We have the ones working in 53206, and they're to each of the 53206 schools, and that's a little bit more of an intensive per school allotment. And then we have 6 centralized positions that operate out of our Green Bay Avenue building above the Success Center there. And those individuals each work with what kind of divides into about 25 schools each. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's a tiered service delivery. So they have 5 that they work at more intensely, working on the bid team meetings and PBIS, and then helping the team with interventions and whatever they may in responding to trauma. And within the 25, they assist our crisis response team whenever needed, do follow up, check on the school within a week post-crisis and those types of things. So that's how those 6 individuals are working as well. And then we also have on 206, I should mention, there are 4 mobile unit employees. We have 2 psychologists and 2 social workers that operate within 206 primarily, sometimes are utilized outside of it, but travel within those schools as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Gokogani.
Absolutely. So I think we have Director Leonard, Director O'Halloran, and then Director Peterson. So I will go to Director Leonard.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for all these detailed information on where those funding sources were coming from. I think that in all honesty, when you go through these budget books, it's very easy to not find what you're looking for. So to be fair to everyone in that case, I do understand where that is missed, but with that information out there, it does look like we're doing an extremely good job of trying to finance our efforts with mental health and interventions in our buildings. But I have some questions. First of all, how many safety vacancies have we had that have not been filled over the past year.
Administration.
Gundy and members of the board, Ed Negron is going to be stepping back in the door because he's more acquainted with that area because he works so closely with it on a daily basis. And Ed, they want to know how many positions that we have that have not been filled this year for safety.
Director Gogolkandi and members of the board. This has been an extraordinary year when it comes to safety assistant vacancies. I looked at the numbers today. We're probably at about 230, maybe a little less of our staffing. And since the beginning of the school year, so in other words, we're about 35 to 40 vacancies open. It's not for lack of trying. I'm on the phone with HR representatives on a regular basis. We attend the job fairs along with HR. And just to give you an idea, this school year, we have hired up to 81 safety assistants. And that still doesn't put us at the maximum capacity. When we were talking about training, our training is a little over a week long. It's about 7 days. So these 81 people you could divide them into about groups of 6 or 7. So that gives you an idea of, we've had more than 10 classes, which is extraordinary. There were years we only had 1 class come through, sometimes 2. If we had 3, that was a lot. This year, we must have had about 10, 11 classes of recruits. For some reason, they find the grass greener somewhere else, and a lot of them just walk away. Whether they're brand new people or some of the veteran ones who find a different job. It's a sad reality, and as much as we don't have the carrots to give them at this time. It's talking to other school districts from the Council of Great City Schools. I meet with them virtually. It used to be every month, and everyone is sharing the same sentiment. It's difficult, and it's a big uphill battle that we're working towards. So that's where we are with as far as the staffing goes. Earlier, I heard some questions about how do resources get filtered or deployed. Every day for us is like, it's a math game for us. We're trying to find from what school we're going to take from to go fill other schools, but we also have a high absenteeism rate. That's the sad reality too. Not every day, but when we do, have a higher than regular absenteeism. And I have to throw in there that COVID didn't help because we had a lot of people out at one time. So we have to spread the resources, and some schools that usually have a certain number of safeties assigned to them are working with maybe a handful of safeties for that day to make ends meet. So I'm hoping that we get some people hired over the summer. We've been in contact with HR about continuing the posting and hiring so that when we hit August, we can hit it running. The other thing is that what we try to do is wrap it up. What we try to do is that the new safeties that get hired, they're probationary. We started a program several years ago we call shadowing, where we put them with a veteran safety assistant to learn the ropes. We found great benefits from that, and that was substantiated even by the principals, because some safeties that come out of the training and go into the school get sticker shock when they see how much they got to work and how to work. There's a science to, or there's an art to working with youth. Not everybody's got that ability. Some have it better than others. So this year we didn't have that luxury. Some of the safeties that just finished their graduation or graduated their recruit class, we gave them about a week to work with a veteran safety assistant, and then we put them sometimes even solo, because that's how much we're hurting right now. I don't like it, but that's the reality.
Thank you. Director Leonard, any follow-up?
Yes, I guess, well, one comment, the last comment you made, putting them in their solo is most definitely a challenge. I can't imagine being put in solo without the training needed in some of our schools, but I understand the situation. I'm not faulting you on that. I just, that just sort of reveals a lot. I have another question, if you don't mind, just a request. When you give us the information about the violence-free zone schools, please make sure we get the names of those 12 schools. Just be curious as to which ones are receiving that assistance. I'm understanding that as all contracted services, and my inclination is to believe that because we cannot hire enough to do a lot of this on our own, we need to have contracted services with these other mentoring programs. I don't have a problem with that. I totally understand that. I did have a chance to work with one of those groups years ago, and actually I thought they did an excellent job with a lot of our youth. So kudos to them. It's been some time back, but they did a good job. I guess the only request I have is, and it's that you do not have to do this now. I would be curious as to how many vacancies we've held out throughout the year for our psychologists, social workers, counselors. I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. So if we could get a report on vacancies that relate to mental health and school safety is what I'm hearing, that would be wonderful, administration. Okay. Go ahead, sorry.
Gandhi and members of the board, I just want to clarify something here as far as riding solo we were talking about. At elementary schools, the safeties are going to be solo. There's one person there. So there is no team. I would also say that out of the 256 or more safeties that are allocated for, our goal is to fill everyone, and we would like to have that ability to do just that. Because as well as other providers that we are working with, such as VFZ and Running Rebels, there's a need support around that. So I just want to be really clear that the safety that's allocated in this budget, there is a need for those individuals, and we're going to have to do everything that we possibly can to get those individuals here. One of the reasons we understand that a number of individuals are walking away is the compensation. And that is one of the things that we have talked about, is a compensation study, so that we can try to stay in sync to make sure that the safety we have is not walking out, going somewhere else for a greater salary. So I just wanted to just echo on that piece.
Great, thank you. So we are going to move to Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. For all of the board members, I put together a really in-depth amendment last year about violent-free zones, so you can refer back to last year's amendment process. Milwaukee Christian Center, if everything is exactly the same, Milwaukee Christian Center is at Bayview High School, Pulaski, Madison, Tech, and South Division. The Running Rebels are at Roosevelt, Lincoln, Washington, North Division, Obama, Vincent, and Hamilton. As of last year, to fully staff it year round, I think would be $256,000 per school. And we were at the time compensating at about 170,000, which left our partner agencies on the hook to fundraise for the balance. And so we had put forward that amendment to try to increase it, in addition to help them keep those relationships over the summer, so that it wasn't just during the school year, so that young people had a mentor available to them throughout the summer. It's a 15-year program, and like they have the data to back it up that it's effective. And just anecdotally, I will say, speaking with principals, they hear about things from the violence-free zone mentors before the school day starts. So like they have those relationships kind of outside of school, where that's like a way they can problem solve before the school day even starts, like from the weekends and stuff. So I would definitely support increasing funding. I would be curious to know from the partner agencies about their ability to staff, because at the time, one of them was not even able to compensate at $15 an hour. So, once again, that kind of is like reflects on us that we're not compensating them enough for them to be able to pay their people. So if we were to try to increase the funding for that, I would be curious to know and maybe that's something, I don't know how to go about this from the amendment perspective, but would it be to go deeper at one school? Would it be to increase across other schools? Because in the past, they used to have 8 mentors, I believe, at each school. And over the years, because the funding stayed flat, they got reduced to 5 mentors at the school. And so I would love to hear more from our partners on their ability to meet the needs of our students, because I do think they have a really effective relationship, and whether they think they could go into other schools. I've had one of my schools that doesn't seem to have problems ask about this, how they can get into the violence-free zones, because the mentors are trained in mental health. They're trained in QPR for suicide reduction and all of these different trainings. So happy to have this conversation about violence-free zones. It's something that I really am very supportive of. So that was just, there's no question there. Sorry, Director Gokul Gandhi. Just wanted to share some of the information I had found through my, investigations last year.
Thank you, Director O'Halloran. Administration, would you like to comment on the comment?
Chair Gokul Gandhi, Director O'Halloran, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. The amount that is in the safety budget, the just over about 2.1 million, was put there because the organizations responded to a request for proposal. And in that, they tell us how much they need to run the program. So we didn't make up the number for them. They told us. But it is understandable in this time of inflation that there may be more need there. There is funding set aside in ESSER though. We did use the amount that was set aside for this year by adding those additional months to fill the gap. There is no gap for 23 in the contract, and there's 720,000 left in ESSER 3 that can help provide supplemental to the contract that they have right now.
Great, thank you. We will move to Director Peterson.
Thank you. Just a quick question going back to the safeties. Is it the goal of the administration to have at least one safety in each school? I know that some of the elementary schools don't have it yet, and I understand we have to have priorities, but it seems to me that it's a good policy to have at least one.
Administration?
Chair Gokul Gandhi and members of the board, that is correct. Our goal is to have at least one safety in every school building. However, some of our high schools and middle schools have a larger number, and we look at that based on the number of students in the building.
Director Peterson, any follow-up?
No, thank you very much.
Great. Any more questions? Director Herndon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is in relation to building size, because what I've been hearing for the last couple of years, especially with one of my schools, is that the size of the building is such that they never have enough safeties to patrol like all of the entrances to the building. And of course, there are times when students open some of the doors to the outside, let others in, and they don't have enough security staff to cover the the real needs of the building from outside access. So is that a consideration when assignments are made?
Administration?
Director Gokul and members of the board. Again, deploying safeties to schools is very flexible. And yes, the size of the building is a consideration. A lot of it has to do with the number of students in the building and the size of the building. And that's two special considerations that we have to take. It'd be easy to double and triple the number of safeties we put in a building like that. And again, we go back to even in a good year, we don't have that kind of resources. So the cameras have implemented a lot extra help over the past few years. Technology has done a great job with getting us the cameras that we need under different funds and the allocation of where they are, that almost every area of the school building, any school building, is usually covered. And that is what we rely on for those buildings where we don't have the number of safeties that we would like to have. Because even if in a situation at a school where we had, say, adequate number of safeties at all the entrances, if that was part of the protocol, things happened that pulled them away from that post. Like in the cafeteria, for example, when you have a few hundred kids together and a disruption starts, then everyone has to come. And now again, we go back to that perimeter isn't as secure as we would want it to be. But I understand exactly what you mean, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
Director Herndon, any follow-up?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Great. Are there any other questions? Is there any further discussion? Okay. Then, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is
Oh, hold
item
on,
number.
sorry, 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. I think the administration has something to say. Move on.
Was now.
I know now when you're trying to wave me down.
Chair Gokul, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. I want to correct something I said earlier.
Sure.
Director Peterson had asked about the Black and Latino Male Achievement Program and how much money is set aside. I said the incorrect number. I said 2.2 million. And as I look at my notes, there's 5.2 million because there's also funding in ESSER 2 for the Black and Latino Male Achievement Program.
Great, thank you for that correction. Anything else from the administration? Okay, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 2, which is a work session and action on amendments to the proposed MPS 2022-23 budget. The recommendation is that the committee determine what action it wishes to take on the amendments to the superintendent's proposed FY 22-23 budget.
Great. At this time, we will hold a work session to consider board members' amendments to the proposed budget. We will not consider amendments to the proposed budget, which are attached to this item. For each amendment, I will ask for a motion to discuss for discussion purposes. We will discuss and take action on that amendment before moving to the next one. Madam Secretary, what is the first amendment?
The first amendment is amendment number 1 by Director Peterson, and that is to use funding from 2 vacant restorative coach positions to fund a director level position and a planning assistant for restorative practices.
Great. Does Director Peterson wish to make any comments?
Yes, I'll first make that motion, which I think you asked for. I move adoption of amendment number 1.
And I see a second by Director
Madam Chair, just for protocol, Director Peterson, you can give comments and that may assist the board members in understanding whether or not they want to second the motion. Okay. So you can explain into the amendment. So just for clarity.
And then Madam Secretary, so just to go over the process, so we can have the author of the amendment give a little introduction, then we can have questions and some discussion and then the motion, right?
So noted, yes.
Thank you. So President Peterson, go ahead.
Sure. I think we all have a commitment to restorative practices. And for a number of years, we've had restorative practices coaches in some of our school, in a few of our schools. We've had actually, my understanding, trouble filling the vacancies in our restorative practices position. However, one issue that came up in my discussion with the current director of the restorative practices in which I've served is that we really need a broader and deeper plan to move the restorative practices forward. And this position will fund a director. Excuse me, I said director before, I meant a supervisor that I was spoken with. This will fund a position, a director level position, and it will put it on the same level as the BMLA and the gender initiative. And it will allow the head of the restorative practices, the new director, to be able to communicate much more quickly and easily with other directors who lead those two groups that I just mentioned, and other people and individuals who are working around mental health and social emotional skills that our restorative practices coaches work with. Now, just to note that I'm suggesting we use funding from the two vacant restorative positions. I believe that we now have 14 positions and 9 of them are filled. We can check with the administration on that. And also to put in a planner, a restorative practices planning assistant. What I've heard from other restorative practice coaches in my discussions with them is they've spent a lot of time on scheduling and paperwork, and if there was a planner, they would have more time and energy to spend on doing restorative practices work. And my thinking, though, is if we fill up all the positions and we have our program in need of more positions as early as October, when we review our budget, I would be interested in finding a way to increase the number of restorative practices positions, assuming that we have a director and the program is, set in such a way that they can absorb and train new coaches. That is my complete, if not somewhat inarticulate, description of why I put together this budget proposal.
Thank you, President.
Madam Chair, and for members of the committee, President Peterson made a motion to approve the amendment. As this is a committee, we do not need a second. The explanation was helpful in the event that a board member would like to co-sponsor, not second the motion.
Great. So I see Director O'Halloran would like to co-sponsor. President Peterson, would you be open to that?
Absolutely.
Great.
So noted.
Director O'Halloran, I'm just going to go to administration first, and then I can come to the committee. So administration.
Yes, Chair Gokagandi and members of the committee. Currently, there are 5 vacant restorative practices coaching positions. The administration agrees that 2 of these vacant positions could be used to hire a director and a planning assistant for restorative practices to help oversee and manage the district-wide implementation. And we are happy to answer any questions to this item at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So wow, I just lost my words. I'm so sorry. Would board members like to make any comments on this item? I know we have Director O'Halloran, so I will go to you first and just raise your hand and I'll get to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to second what Director Peterson was talking about. I spoke with someone last year and they said it was almost like we created too many coaching positions and what they really needed was someone to coordinate the work. And so that's why I was so eager to co-sponsor this. I don't think it's an indication that we are trying to shy away from the work. I think it's to better support the work in disseminating it, out to more people. So I want to thank Director Peterson for bringing this forward. I want to thank the coaches and all of the restorative practices staff who have been doing this important work. And I am hopeful that if this amendment passes and we are able to staff this up, that even more schools would be supported by these initiatives. So thank you, Director Peterson and staff.
Thank you, Director O'Halloran. Any other comments or discussion? Okay. Do we proceed with the motion on the floor? Yes. Okay, so can we please do the roll call, Madam Secretary?
Yes, Madam Chair. So on Director Peterson's motion to approve amendment number 1 with the intent to use funding from 2 vacant restorative coach positions to fund a director level position and a planning assistant for restorative practices. On the motion by Director Peterson, Director Herndon,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Peterson,
Aye.
Director Seamson,
Aye.
Director Taylor,
Aye.
and Chair Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. The next amendment is Amendment 2 by Director Peterson and Director Taylor, and it's to allocate funding for a lobbying specialist to assist the board with advocation on behalf of the district at the local, state, and national levels to ensure favorable fiscal and other policies. This position will primarily focus on relationships with other elected officials and community-based organizations. Do either Director Taylor or Director Peterson wish to make any comments? Director Taylor.
Thank you for this. And I just wanted to say, like, I know this seems like we are creating a new position, and even to talk about it, it took me a pause. There was a position that was already created within the Office of Board Governance, and due to a tragic accident, it took the life of Caesar Stinson that was working with us. And so I just wanted everybody to understand that we have to create this position because then it was taken out of the budget, but this is something that the Office of Board Governance had before. It's something that is really needed and vital as we continue to advocate for our baby, our school district, our staff and educators. And so I will ask all to join in support of this, if not co-sponsoring, to vote that we get this position back into the office immediately. And I move approval.
Perfect, thank you. So I saw a hand raised by Director Leonard for a co-sponsor. Director Taylor, would you be open to that?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. We will go first to the second author of the amendment, and then we will go to the Office of Board Governance for comment. So President Peterson.
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Director Taylor said. If people might not be familiar with the work of Caesar and his background, but he was a Milwaukee raised and very connected person. He had great relationships with a whole array of community leaders. Quite frankly, his shoes will be difficult to fill. And I'm one who believes that, a position like this, which has a big impact on our relationship to not only elected officials, but with the community at large, we're going to have to take care to find an individual who can fulfill the job at least half as good as SACER did. So with that, I thank Director Taylor for explaining the seriousness of this, and I look forward to positive votes by the board committee.
Madam Chair.
Office of Board Governance, would you wish to make comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you so much. Just echoing the sentiments of both the sponsors of the resolution. Well, the incumbent for this position, Mr. Caesar Stinson, was both internationally and domestically connected to so many different organizations and local groups. Some of the main things he did for the board was to establish those relationships when there was a changeover in governmental positions every year, going to the different offices in Madison, making sure that all of the representatives actually had contact information for board members, arranging meetings and just assisting in making sure that those relationships could be established and both maintained. Understanding how busy you guys are, you actually had somebody that would be able to be on the ground and continually cultivating those relationships on your behalf and the students and families of Milwaukee Public Schools. So we definitely have that void in our office right now, and we look forward to being able to fill it.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Director Herndon.
I wanted to share those sentiments as others have as well. I got to know Mr. Stinson ever so briefly before I ever considered running for the board, and he was doing exactly what everyone is speaking of. He was a wonderful, loving soul, and he was very outgoing and looking to better our connections with the others throughout the state and nationwide. And he's sorely missed, and I'd be more than happy to approve this for sure.
Great. Is there more discussion? Great. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Taylor's motion to approve amendment number 2 by Directors Peterson and Taylor, adding the co-sponsor Director Leonard, to allocate funding for a lobbying specialist to assist the board with advocation on behalf of the district at the local, state, and national levels to ensure favorable fiscal and other policies. On the motion is read into the record. Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
And Chair Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
And I realized, Madam Secretary, that I did not give administration the chance to speak. Would it be improper to allow them comment on the item?
It is not improper, certainly.
Well, we will go to administration. I'm very sorry.
No problem. Chair Gokul and members of the board. The amendment requests funded for a lobbying specialist position to assist the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. The lobbying specialist position is an important relationship builder and an advocacy position for the district and can be funded as spelled out in the amendment. We are 100% in support of this amendment.
I'm glad to hear that. The next amendment is Amendment 3 by Director Leonard, and it is to add one more step to the pay scale for secretaries and clerical staff as a long-term incentive to remain within the district. Director Leonard, would you like to make some comments?
I would. First of all, I understand where administration is looking at the fact that a short-term one-time longevity bonus is much more financially careful than it would be for adding steps. I am looking at just how many job classes we have in our district and how poorly we are able to retain them. And this is just one of those groups, the secretaries, but with 44% of our secretaries have left our employment in the last 3 years, we are losing our brain trust. We are losing the people that run our schools. And when I get calls from schools where they have no secretary, some have not had a secretary for months, I can't imagine if I were an administrator or even teacher in that building, the difficulties of getting your building to run in the mornings, especially. So I'm actually a little bit, I believe that this is a small amount of money to put out there, and it's just one step, but I'm just sort of proposing this and asking for your support for this to make sure that we can somehow in some way induce our secretaries to stay on a little bit longer, to stay in our district and know that there's a reason to stay at NPS. So I'll leave it at that.
Does administration wish to make any comments?
Chair Gokangandi and members of the committee. The amendment requests adding a step to the salary schedule for secretaries and clerical staff. This extra step would be for more experienced staff at the top of the scale. I'm going to ask Martha Kreisman, who's here with me this evening, to provide some additional information. Martha.
Chair Gokangandi, members of the committee, Martha Kreitzman, Chief Financial Officer. As Dr. Posley mentioned, the extra step would be for the most experienced secretarial and clerical staff. This would be a permanent increase. There are a few things to consider with this amendment. In April, the board approved a longevity bonus that is just for this purpose, adding a bonus in the amount of a step for staff at the top level in order to retain the most experienced staff. In addition, there's a bonus for staff that are eligible to retire with benefits. Therefore, a secretary or clerical staff could be eligible for both bonuses. In addition, there's a planned 4.7% cost of living raise, which also raises that top step on the schedule. Currently, the administration is working to have a study completed on the salary schedules. The administration recommends waiting for the study to be complete before adding a permanent additional step.
Thank you. Do committee members wish to speak? And I see two, so we'll go to Director Taylor and then Director Herndon and then Director O'Halloran. So Director Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Gokul-Gandhi. I would just like to ask to be a co-sponsor and thank Director Leonard for bringing this forward. Having been someone that have worked with several secretaries working within NPS, the job that they do is top notch. They're one of the many faces you see as you come into the school, and seeing that we have so many who have left because of this, I think it's more of a reason to say that we should move forward in doing this. So once again, thank you, Director Leonard, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Director Leonard, would you be okay with Director Taylor being a co-sponsor?
Most definitely.
Great.
So noted.
Thank you. So then we will go to Director Herndon.
Thank you. Director Taylor just beat me on asking to be co-sponsor, but I'd like everyone to know that I totally support this. I had been studying secretarial salaries, and we do need to do all we can to retain them for sure. I support all the work they do and totally respect the responsibilities that they carry throughout the day. So absolutely.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you, Chair Gokul-Gandhi. I also am in support of this. I understand that we're going to do, I know when you single out one class of employee, it can cause some consequences. I know there will be other classes of employees who also have concerns. I just want to point out that I spoke with one secretary who's been with the district for 20 plus years, and she does not make enough. I mean, without getting into it, this is one person. I mean, just sharing the amount of work she does, and in supporting one of my schools that the parents are very happy with that school. They're happy with the service that they're getting, and I know that she is playing a critical role in that. So I support the administration's effort to do the compensation study. I think it's long overdue, and I think we should do more for all of our employees. And in the meantime, I think that this is a really good bridge until we have further data on that. So thank you.
Thank you. We will go to Director Peterson.
Yes, I was wondering if the administration could give a little more information about both the scope and the timeline for the study that they've talked about and what specific groups would be first studied and then, or all of them at once. I'm just curious because I do believe that compensation, as we've heard earlier today, tonight with our safeties and EAs and a number of other people that we're really short on, does play a big role. So we could get some more details on that plan. I would like to hear it.
Sure. Administration.
Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of Committee, Adrian Madeline, Chief Human Resources Officer. When initially I went out looking for some potential vendors for this, I looked for an organization, a group that could do the study of all of our salary schedules, because I think ultimately that's what we want looked at. I could tell you the responses, that's a big task to do. And a few of the vendors indicated that too much of a task to take on for them, but did find one that has been used with a lot by other schools in the Council of Great City Schools. And I've talked to them, and the process would take a while. So we were looking at starting out and kind of doing it in phases and looking at doing for this upcoming year, if this contract is approved, focusing on a select group. As you mentioned, looking at paraprofessionals, looking at safety assistants, looking at the clerical group, looking at administrators, looking at food service. There's a group that we're looking at that we want to have considered. And so at this moment, trying to get a final quote on what that pricing would be. And then hopefully, if all possible, in the next month or two, bring a contract for the board to consider.
Director Peterson, any follow-up?
Yeah, just would that also include, like, I'm thinking HCAs and building helpers as well?
Administration.
Chair Gokul Gandhi and members of the board, yes, food service workers as well as safety, HCAs, paras, as well as building service helpers. That is the first group that we want to look at.
Director Peterson, any follow-up?
No, I think it would be good to look at that group, and obviously we can, as we adjust salaries, we can take into account, whether or not the secretary increase at this time that might be passed would be, obviously would be considered in terms of their overall compensation. So I see no reason why we can't act on this at this point, and then really imagine, hopefully, not only paying our set of employees that was going to be discussed in the study more, but also finding a way to pay them by getting the state legislature to do what's right for kids and for staff, because obviously that's an underlying question we have to face as we move forward.
Thank you. Director Simpson.
Thank you. Director Peterson kind of asked my question. I was just looking for some more detail with the compensation study, but I will just add that, I think as we discussed with kind of keeping people in the district, offering incentives, someone said, well, how many people is this really going to keep in our district? And for me, the way I look at it is, if it's a body, it's a body. We have so many vacancies, and I think right now, I'm glad to hear we're going to do this compensation study, but to also make sure that we're doing what we can as quick as we can to offer people a reason to stay. So I just want to thank Director Leonard for taking this on.
Thank you, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I did. So it's tangentially related to the amendment, I did want to also convey one thing that I heard from the secretaries with whom I met was also a need for mentorship. So keeping the experienced staff is really important, because sometimes the newer secretaries, like, they're kind of put into these positions without understanding, like, just go work, and so I'm hopeful that with the retaining of the secretaries who have been with us for decades, that we can also consider maybe going forward how we could create mentorship roles for secretaries to transfer that knowledge. And then that would also help with retention, so that secretaries who don't feel well supported currently may be more willing to stay in the district. So I think this is a really important step to kind of bridge that. So.
Administration?
Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Adrian Madeline, Chief Human Resources Officer. Yes, and I've had conversations with the secretaries and their union representative, and agree that there is areas in terms of training that can be improved upon for the secretary group. And it's a unique situation where we have our secretaries are spread across the district, and they report, their supervisor is, the principal, and there isn't like a department that oversees them. Like if you have like school safety, you have food service, you have nutrition, that can kind of bring them all together and let's do a training and let's do it all together. So it's a little unique that they haven't had that one point of contact. So, and we are definitely committed to look into that and make sure how we can wrap in some type of training when people are hired, when they begin, and then trying to do some of that mentorship, see if there can be some matching with experienced secretaries, and make sure throughout the year that they get some training opportunities on those professional development days that students aren't in session.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director O'Halloran.
Do we have a motion? If we don't have a motion, it would be my pleasure to move approval of this amendment.
Great. Is there any further discussion? Okay, will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve amendment number 3 by Director Leonard, with the intent to add one more step to the pay scale for secretaries and clerical staff as a long-term incentive to remain with the district. The motion is read into the with Director Taylor as the co-sponsor. The motion is read into the record. Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
And Chair Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Madam Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
Great. There being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.
Good evening.